Well, the truth hasn't been the truth hasn't been real popular lately. Let's face it.
Yeah.
The lies coming out of the administration are enormous, and sadly, despite the Russia hoax, people continue to believe what they hear through the television from just about anybody, and that's one of our big problems. This particular meeting in Vilnius is very important because the Russians are watching to see what comes out of it. And thus far, we have a couple of things. First of all, we haven't said, no, Ukraine cannot join NATO. What we've said, actually, is that the two-step process is now going to become a one-step process. Of course, with the caveat that you can then join when the war is over. The second part, though, is very, very important. And that is that the members are now supposedly openly discussing war plans against Russia. Now, this kind of thing is extremely sensitive, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
You can imagine the impact on Moscow. Thus far, Putin has held 300,000 troops in reserve, hoping that he doesn't have to commit them because he's always worried about NATO intervention. And at the same time, you have the Poles and Lithuanians who are saying, well, we're going to go in regardless of what the NATO alliance says. And if we go in, we're not really going to drag NATO with us. The problem with that, of course, is that they're part of NATO. And if they do go in, the Russians will treat them as a NATO Trojan horse and they will attack. So we're really on the path to war. And I think we ought to start asking some hard questions of this man who's 80 years old, who has trouble finding his way off the stage, about what he's actually doing. I mean, we're in the hands of a man who is not entirely mentally stable. And I think everybody in the United States ought to ask, what are we doing? What are our interests in Ukraine? We don't really have any interests per se there. If you're going to argue this is about democracy, well, that's ridiculous. Right now, the Ukrainian state, what there is left of it, is more totalitarian than anything we've seen since Stalin. There's nothing there for us whatsoever. Most Europeans want nothing to do with this. So why is everyone so interested in going to war with Russia? I haven't figured it out. We don't have enough ammunition for our own forces. We have very few ground forces, very small numbers. If this gets out of hand, we are not in a position to match Russian military power on the ground. And if we can't do that, what do we do? Increasingly, we are becoming a third world country. We no longer trust the FBI. I mean, the FBI used to be one of those institutions that held absolute, total, and complete confidence of the American people.
True.
Now, people are all saying, well, if they come to your door, whatever you do, don't talk to them and call an attorney right away. I mean, this is a very sick development in our country. And of course, we're not enforcing the laws. The whole point is that today, if you are an American and you do not necessarily agree with the administration and its policies, and you voice that, you are at risk if you deal with. Yeah, well, the first question is, where's the Secretary of Defense? Where's the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs? Where are the Chiefs of Staff? They have an obligation to ensure that our war stocks are adequate. They have an obligation to ensure that if we have to suddenly fight, no one is going to lack for ammunition or body armor or a whole range of things. But we know that's not the case. And these cluster munitions, those things are old. We haven't used them for a very long time, and for good reasons. First of all, they weren't that effective. They had a huge dud rate. Secondly, they were more trouble than they were, because as you advanced, it wasn't a problem for tanks and armored fighting vehicles, but anyone in a wheeled vehicle, in a truck or a Humvee, was at risk. And then, obviously, civilians, especially children, were attracted to these bright, shiny objects on the floor that looked like baseballs, and they harmed themselves. And we said, we're not going to use them anymore. Well, apparently, we have nothing else to send.
Wow.
Someone needs to be fired. Someone needs to be fired. Obviously, we know the man at the top needs to go away.
Yeah.
He needs to be sent to a nice place where he can meet with his grandchildren from time to time.
All
But
grandkids.
the rest of these characters, the rest of these, the rest of these people, they should be held accountable, but no one on the Hill cares. You see, I think there's this feeling that we can provoke the Russians, we can bully the Russians, and nothing really bad will happen. They're wrong. We're on a bad road right now, a dangerous road. For the first time, I really think we're on the road to war with Russia, and someone needs to put a stop to it.